We're all good to go. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining in. I'm happy to have Graeme Seal joining us today. Thanks, Graeme, for joining us.
Thank you. No problem at all.
Graeme's I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly. Is it the emeritus?
Oh, emeritus. Yeah, yeah.
Emeritus
One of
professor?
those big words that universities like
Yeah.
to use, which just means basically I've retired and they still like me a bit.
So, of folklore at Curtin University. He's a leading expert on Australian cultural history and the best-selling author of the Great Australian Stories, Larrikins, Bush Tales and Other Great Australian Stories, Great Australian Journeys, Great Bush Stories, Great Convict Stories, and Australia's Funniest Yarns. And his latest book is Great Australian Mysteries. If I can share my copy there. So I'm really happy to have you join us. Just wondering if you want to start off by telling us a bit about your latest book, The Great Australian Mystery. Oh, sorry. Also, before you start, I was going to mention as well, anyone watching, thanks to Alan and Unwin. If you do ask a question, and you'll have a chance to win a copy of Great Australian Mysteries, which is really great.
You'll win a prize if you ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay. Well, it's Great Australian Mysteries, and it's, as you just pointed out there in your introduction, it's the latest in a series of books I've been writing for about 10 years or so with Alan and Unwin. And it all started out with when I was going to write the kind of great definitive work on Australian folk tales way back when, and off I went doing all the research and started writing, and then I got about halfway through and found out that unfortunately no one was going to publish it because it wasn't commercial enough for the market. So that was a bit of a downer, but and then I thought, oh well, what about the stories? They might be interesting by themselves, which I guess is really why I kind of got into it in the first place, because they were. The publishers were a bit reluctant. But anyway, in the end, they did publish it. I think it's probably to shut me up, get me off their case. And to their surprise and mine, it was very successful. So since then, as you said, that I've done that series of books on different aspects of Australian history and folklore, and looking at as many different kinds of stories and situations as I can find, and there's quite a lot of them.
Yeah.
And we're still going strong here with the mysteries.
Yeah. So do you find, like, when you're researching for one of your books, you find a lot more that you think, oh yeah, that will be great for my next book?
It is. That's actually a bit of a danger, really. Yeah, you kind of get carried away and think, oh, that would be good. Or it might make a whole book, and away you go. And of course, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But whatever, it does take you off the trail a bit, and you tend to get a bit waylaid, or I do anyway. But usually I get there in time.
Yeah, yeah. And just wondering if, without giving any spoilers of any of your books or anything, I'm sure you've got lots of amazing things that you found or things that have really, really surprised you. Is there something that you might be able to share with us?
Yeah, I think the one of the things that surprised me, to some extent anyway, I more or less confirmed what I thought for a while, was that although obviously Australia's only been settled by Europeans since 1788, and there are a whole lot of stories that we hear for a very long time before we arrived, and there has been since then some coming together of stories between Aboriginal stories and Australian settler stories. And I guess a good example of that would be the story of the Bunyip, which you will know, of course, is very widely known now, and that's based upon, of course, an Aboriginal legend of a water-dwelling creature that is a bit unpleasant. But it also it plays into British stories about similar creatures in their waterways and water holes as well, and around the world, in fact. So it's a kind of an international folk tale, but as I said, it's come together in the Australian situation to make a whole new thing, which is the bunyip, which kind of, depend on how you present it, can either be a pretty horrible thing or can be even quite cute and cuddly.
Yeah.
There's cute books around, I think, of bunyips. I think there's even a school that has a mascot, bunyip mascot as their mascot.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I have to say, from my own experience of reading your book, I've lived in Australia for 12, 13 years now. So I found it really interesting because there's a lot of things that I'd never even heard about. And just to get to know about some more things about the history and that as well of Australia, I found that really good.
Oh, that's good, because that's one of the things I try to do in this series, is to present aspects of Australian history and folklore in ways that people will find entertaining, but also informative. So it sounds like I've got it right there.
Yeah, and I liked how, like, just little bits, so it's quite easy to read as well.
Yeah, I'll try to steer away from the kind of heavier academic stuff that I've spent quite a lot of the time writing as well.
Yeah.
But I draw on that, and my research is I do quite a bit of research, a lot of primary source research in archives, newspapers, and also oral history and folklore collections of one kind or another. And I try and bring it all together into an interesting story. Particularly the human interest angle, I think, is the thing that pins them down.
Yeah,
Dramatic, they might be sad, they might be tragic or whatever.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, you want that kind of human interest to come through.
Yeah, and I was interested in the mystery book, how you had Luna Park in there. Not too long ago, watched the documentary about that, so it was interesting to read your take on it all
That's
as
right.
well.
Yeah, I stopped
yeah.
writing, I guess, about the beginning of last year. So that the story's kind of moved along a bit since then. Actually, so there's an update for volume 2, I guess, if it ever happens. But
Yeah.
and that's the same with quite a few of the stories there. Another one in Sydney was the Juanita Nielsen story, of course, of the journalist who disappeared in the 70s and has never, her body's never been found.
That wasn't it. Yeah.
Oh, backstory there. There's been all kinds of inquiries of one kind or another, and again, a podcast recently, which was a bit controversial as it turned out. But nevertheless, it's a story and a mystery that goes on, and again, no resolution.
Yeah. And what I found really interesting as well is like in one book, there's so many different stories in there, and also from such a wide range of years and everything. Must take you a long time to do all the research for them all.
Yeah, I spend a good time, probably more time researching than writing. It's probably 60-40, I'd say. Sometimes they fall into place quite well. Other times I spent an awful long time tracking things down. The last few years, of course, has meant that we've got to do everything on the internet because I can't go anywhere to look at archives. But fortunately, we have Trove, and we have a whole lot of digitised resources now, which means that people like me can actually more or less sit at home on their computers like we are here, and actually access that kind of information, which is a wonderful thing, especially me at my age. When I started, you couldn't do anything like that. If you wanted anything at all, you had to go there, get the newspapers out, always in some great bound volume, and go through it page by page.
You certainly would have seen a change in the way research was done.
Great thing for me and many other people, of course, too. To be able to have access to that kind of information more or less at your fingertips.
Exactly. And we've got quite a few people watching, which is great. Just reminding the people watching that if you have a question for Graeme, please type it in comments and you'll have a chance to win a copy of Great Australian Mysteries. I do have some questions from some people, so I'll start reading them out. Sharon wonders what genre you like to read yourself, and if you have any recommendations for us, maybe.
Right, yeah. I read generally non-fiction and heavily into history, folklore, of course, and that's my main area these days. When I was younger, I used to read a lot of sci-fi and fantasy. They were very appealing, I think, for me as a younger person, and I think that's probably stuck in my interest on mysteries and some of the supernatural side of things as well. We've got a selection of supernatural mysteries in the book. What I've been reading lately is I've actually been reading a book by a Scots author, Neil Oliver, who's well known on TV as a presenter of documentaries, history documentaries. He's a guy with very long hair. It was sort of slightly dramatic presentation appearance. He's an archaeologist by trade, I think, but he does all sorts of things. He's always digging things up, and he's also written a number of books about the kind of things he's interested in. And the latest one of his, or that I've read anyway, is one on British places. I think it's called 101 British Places. And the reason I was reading that was because the next book I'm writing is going to be called Great Australian Places.
Oh, okay.
I better see
Yeah.
he does it,
Yeah.
and what he's doing. But I didn't do it until after I'd finished writing most of the one I'm doing. So I found out he's got to take a very different approach than I have. But I can recommend it. It's very readable.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting if you're interested in aspects of British history and also archaeology. The past, the prehistoric era, as much as the historic era.
And all the books you've done, are they all in Australian background?
These ones in this series are,
Yeah.
I've also written books about bandits and outlaws of an international kind. The Ned Kellys and Robin Hoods of the world.
Yeah.
And, I've done that, and I've also done books on war and in relation to using the trench journals of World War One. These were the magazines that troops used to present for themselves or produce and present for themselves, and in World War One, and so they give you a bit of an insight into what it was like to actually be in the trenches. And so I did a book on those a few years ago as well. So they're amongst my more academic sort of writings. Again, interesting to me and some others, but they may not be very readable for most people.
Yeah.
But great stuff anyway.
Yeah.
And they're very expensive. This is the thing about academic books. Because they're done generally for libraries and university libraries and things like that, rather than for the average reader, they're about $120.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering, do you have a favourite era in history?
It used to be the 19th century, and now I'm finding I'm going, as I get older. It's a bit worrying, really. As I get older, I find I'm going backwards. I did a book also came out last year called Condemned, which was about the transportation of men, women, and children around the British Empire.
Okay.
So that took me back. Yeah, that took me back to the 16th century and even further, actually, 15th century. I'm finding that I'm getting more and more familiar, if you like, and comfortable in those eras as well.
Yeah.
One of the things I guess is appealing about them is that as you get further back, the sources tend to be fewer. So you actually, there's less to look at.
Yeah.
You can actually sort of bone up on things a bit more quickly than you can in the later era when we're kind of overwhelmed by information.
Yeah, that's very true. Sharon's wondering how long it took for you to write your latest book.
Yeah, it generally takes me about a year, I'm thinking. So with this series we've been talking about, I generally do one a year. So by the time I've got one finished, I'm working on the next one, and it's about a year. So sort of I write and research more or less at the same time as part of the same process. I think I find that the writing helps me with the research, and if something's not going to work, okay, I'll find out that process, so I can leave that one and go and do something else. So that's a useful way to go.
And Belinda's wondering if you could tell us what the most interesting place in Australia is that you've visited.
Oh, that I've visited.
Yeah, that you've visited.
Yeah, that I've visited. Well, I rather like the Katoomba in New South Wales and the Megalong Valley.
Oh, yes.
And I don't know if you know it at all, and that area down there, and the Grose Valley, and the Three Sisters, that very dramatic presentation there of rocks and forests.
Yeah.
I've actually walked down there as a younger man. I walked down there, spent a week down the Grose Valley, bushwalking down there. And it's a magical place. It was then, and I hope it still is.
Yeah.
If you're in Sydney, it's easy to get to.
Yeah. I'm not too far from there, but I've been to the Three Sisters, but need to explore great more.
Stories. That's right. Yeah.
And Kelly's got a really good question. Kelly says, which historical event would you like to have would you have liked to have been a first-hand spectator?
Good question. I don't know where to start. All of them. But as far as Australia is concerned, probably the Eureka Stockade, I think.
Yeah.
A magic moment to have been around because of all the lead up to it, as much as the actual event itself, and the violence, of course, which was pretty dreadful. I mean, in a sense, the miners obviously invited it, but the government responded in kind by sending armed military as well as police actually to put it down. So it was very nasty, but it did lead up. There was a long lead up to it. People were unhappy on the goldfields because of the policing and also because of the tax they had to pay to actually get a miner's right to dig holes in the ground and hopefully make their fortunes. And it did have ongoing consequences, I think, for Australia's democracy as well. And I think that event was really quite a pivotal one, and also a very colourful and dramatic one as well.
Yeah, it would have been, yeah. And I'm wondering, like, when you were growing up or at school and that, were you a bit of a writer then? And was that always your aspiration to be a writer?
Yeah, I think so. I started pretty early. I can remember the first thing I tried to write was a book called Mystery Strikes at Midnight.
Okay.
I was about 8 or 9.
Yeah.
I haven't finished it yet. At least I've done a book on mysteries now. It was a story, a kid's story, of course, as it would be at that age. But I've been reading Enid Blyton and all those kind of authors of that era when I grew up. But so I did start fairly early on. About the only thing I was any good at school was English. Here I am.
Yeah. And Kelly wonders if you prefer your work as a professor or as a writer.
That's a very good question. Well, now that I'm
might
retired,
you might get yourself in trouble if you.
That is a very good question. Certainly, when I was as at the university and following an academic career, of course, you're expected to research and write various kinds of academic works and all of that. So I did enjoy that, and that was one of the reasons I went into university teaching and research, because I wanted to work in an environment that would allow me to write books. So I did write academic books, but I always had an interest in writing popular books as well, like this one. And so that's what I tried to do. As I said, I try and use the research in ways that will be interesting and informative to people who want to read the books.
Yeah. And how do you go about choosing what subject your next book is going to be around?
Yeah, good question again. It's kind of a bit weird, really. It just happens. I thrash around a lot. Thrash around. I thrash around a lot. And will I do that? Will I do that? And I usually do a bit. And I think, no, that's not going to work. And I'll try something else. And it's kind of an ongoing process over quite a long period of time. And eventually something either works, something gels, and that becomes the book.
Yeah. And do you have any writing rituals?
No, only trying to keep going.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite place to write?
Filling the page. It's harder as you get older, I've discovered. But I'm not much of a ritualist when it comes to write, like the pencil sharpeners and whatever it might be. And trying to avoid actually doing anything. My desk is so messy usually. I've tied it up a bit behind me, so for the purposes of the interview. It's fairly messy. So I don't try and tidy it because that would be a complete waste of time. And I just try and get on with the job. Once I get going, I'm okay because I get into the flow and away I go.
Yeah. And what about a favourite place to write?
I write up here. I've got a desk here when I'm sitting out here with the computer. I've got some books there behind me and a stack more over in the room. I'm up on the first floor of the house we live in. And this is where I do my scribbling.
Yeah. And do you need everything perfectly quiet, or do you play some music, or?
It would be nice, but it doesn't happen. Now we have neighbours, of course.
Yeah.
Have a kid, and there's dogs, and there's helicopters. We've been getting a lot of helicopters lately. I'm not sure why coming over. Just when you don't really want one.
Yeah.
They make quite a lot of noise. But I just cultivated, I guess, the ability to block it out and just sort of go on and keep going.
And for you, what do you think makes a good story?
I think they're stories that appeal to people. They must, I think, have a human interest.
Yeah.
Mostly, anyway. I mean, you can write a good story with a beginning and a middle and an end without people. But it's quite hard. I can't know because I've tried and I have done several, and you'll find a few in the book actually, although there's not that many. I find generally the thing that really nails it, and for everybody, for me and for the reader, is you've got to have that human connection somewhere. It's got to be, you've got to relate to the person or people involved in the situation. So I think that's good. With the mysteries too, they're quite intriguing because they humans, of course, are curious people. We can't stand not knowing the answer to things.
Yeah.
So if we don't know the answer, we make it up. We make lots of answers up, in fact, and all of those answers tend to be quite good stories. So if I can put the two or three things together, I find that I've got a reasonable story that I can tell.
And what have you found the most difficult part of your writing process?
Probably it's probably getting published, in a way. I mean, it was hard when I started. I've been writing since I published my first book in 1980, so I've been at it for a while.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to get any easier.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask of it.
It's in fact, I think it's got more difficult in the last probably 15 years because there's so many more books being published. I think so that there's massive competition, and the internet, I think, has kind of amplified that. So publishers now have an enormous amount to choose from, and you're only as good as your last book, really.
Yeah.
And if it didn't go well, and publishers are generally not terribly interested in talking to you again, so you've got to start the process all over again. And the other thing, I guess, has changed is that you used to be able to just more or less approach publishers out of the blue with your idea or whatever it was. That's getting very difficult to do now, and you generally need to go with an agent. Complicates things a bit more.
And like you said, you've been writing for a long time. Is there anything you do especially to keep things fresh and keep the readers interested?
Yeah, I try to, as I said, I try looking for those kind of stories that make sense at a human level, as well as anything else. I also find that when we know a story ourselves, we tend to think everyone else knows it.
Yeah.
But in fact, I found that that's not necessarily the case. In fact, it's often not the case that the stories we know, other people don't know. I mean, you said earlier, I think that you found a few in here, in that book, that you hadn't heard of before. Someone else may be completely familiar with it. So if we know it, we assume everyone else does, but it's not the case. So the telling and the retelling of the stories, I think, is in the back of my mind all the time, saying, yes, okay, I know this story, but there will be people reading this book who definitely won't know it. And so I'll make it as interesting and entertaining and informative for them as I can.
And do you get a lot of readers contact you?
Not a lot, but a few come to me and write to me with sometimes with updates. Or they've had a story that they think I might like to follow up. And I have on some occasions followed those up, and they turned out to be good ones. I can't remember which ones they were now, but generally speaking, it's mainly me sort of, as I said, ferreting around strange places. Interesting stories to tell people that often, as I said, often make a point. Not so much in this book, but perhaps, but in some of the other books, there's an awful lot of myths around history and folklore, of course. And folklore is a form of myth in itself. So I spend quite a lot of time trying to make sure that I tell the true story, if you like, or the historical facts are there, even whether the folkloric myth might be more intriguing. I tell that too. So, but I'm always careful to try and make the difference clear between the two. So it's a bit of a kind of subversive teaching technique as well, I suppose. I guess I'm still teaching.
And are you the sort of person at a gathering or a party that has all the stories to tell everyone?
Not terribly, no. I've got stories if anybody wants to hear them, but I'm generally more interested in listening to other people's stories. I've always probably been a better listener. And I find again that listening to what people say, how they say things, and what they talk about is much more interesting. So I'm not a great person to have at your party, really, because I'm a bit of an eavesdropper. What you're all saying.
Trying to find everyone's secrets.
In a book later on, you better watch out.
Well, thanks so much for talking to me. It's been great chatting to you.
Great talking to you too, Jackie, and thanks for the questions, and thanks to everyone for the interest in my book.
Thanks to everyone who joined in. We had some great questions.
You did.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.